overstepping their bounds and making policy for legislative process, for electoral process, which is the legislature's job. And it concerns me that other people, such as the other candidate, are dismissing the importance of that and not recognizing the constitutional issues that are presented. And if you're going to put your hand on that Bible or whatever book and say that you swear to uphold the Constitution, you better understand it. And nobody understands it better than Dan, and I think that's a very important issue for here. But for today, the issue was truly whether or not the court should be dictating how these elections are won or lost or run. And obviously it's our opinion that that's not the bailiwick of the court, that's the bailiwick of the legislature. And so it was a very interesting day, challenging. Judges are tough and smart and well prepared. So we're eager for a ruling. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dan Cox.
It's truly an honor to have Ed Hartman representing our campaign and the people of Maryland to ensure election integrity is how we operate our elections this fall. You know, it's an interesting constitutional question in front of us to think that if a governor overturns with a veto a legislative act, that we don't necessarily need, if the court decides against us, we don't need to get a legislative override. We can just simply look for a judge to do that. That's not how we do law and the constitutional process of separation of powers in Maryland. And I don't think we want that precedent to be established in this case. So we're at a position where we're simply responding to the Westmore's support of the state board's request to overturn the governor's veto and to allow early counting. I actually support early counting, but not without the safeguards and the adequate protections that the Constitution and law mandates. And so with that, we're very hopeful. I'm grateful for the excellent counsel. We're looking forward to the court's ruling.
When you say safeguards, what kinds of safeguards are you talking about?
Well, the ones that Governor Hogan identified were pretty clear, and that is to make sure we have chain of custody and signature protections. They're not there yet, so if you just simply begin to count early. One of the things that concerns me is you separate the envelopes from the ballots as they're counted, and you can never go back. Under election law, the law says that you're allowed to, any candidate, whether it's the governor all the way down to the Board of Education, can challenge their election if it's close. But if you separate the envelopes with the signatures on them that are supposed to be on them from the ballots, you can never challenge those envelopes again. So it's a serious issue for all candidates on the ballot from every party.
I'm wondering, if I drop off my mail-in ballot today and it just sits and sits and sits, isn't there more chance for some kind of foolishness to go on than if they pick it up right away and count it?
And that's why the legislature wanted to address this issue, and unfortunately they didn't get it done. And the process that the law establishes is for the legislature to make sure that that bill passes, and the governor needs to then support it or allow it to become law.
Okay.
Delegate Cox, if the court upholds the decision and mail-in ballots are counted early, do you plan to accept the results?
The result of the court decision?
The
I certainly will respect the court's decision. And in terms of the election, we're going to make sure that we uphold the process of the Constitution and law. And just like you have any situation, like let's say you have a surgery, you want to make sure the surgery goes well before you make a final judgment. You can't project on the end result. So we are going to uphold the law and the process with the Constitution as the foundation for that at every point.
So if mail-in ballots are counted early, you will not be accepting the results of the election?
I haven't said that. That's not what I've said. I said very clearly we're going to uphold the Constitution and the law, which includes the entire election process, which will include the counting of the ballots, so long as there's, you know, a process allowed, which the state law allows, to verify that those ballots were counted appropriately and that they're accurate.
What would that process be? I mean, if they have their own
Sure.
security measures and they count and they say, whoops, sorry, you lost, would you accept that?
I would like to see if Jamie Raskin believes in that too, because I think he voted against certain aspects, and that's why the state law makes it very clear that there is a process to examine the counting issues. If there are any anomalies, every candidate, not just myself, but just like in Frederick County, I mentioned this before, the Democrat Party challenged the candidacy there because of a person who defeated the incumbent by one vote. And the process of recounting is a state legal process that's supported by the code, and it was followed. And that person was then decertified, including all candidates on the ballot during that period of recounting. So I will support the process at every step, and that includes, the right of every candidate on the ballot to have a recount if necessary to look at those results.
How much have you spent so far on this challenge, and who's paying for the appeal?
Oh, I don't have a number, and I'm very grateful that my attorneys are graciously helping us, and the campaign is certainly the one that is paying for the costs.
Speaking of money, you have a fundraiser coming up at Mar-a-Lago in later this month. How is that working out financially between what the former president gets, what you get, and what's your expectation of how much you might raise?
Well, the president's helping us do this without anything back to him, and we're very grateful, and it's going very well. And so we're in this race, and we're in it to win it.
There was a report that maybe Kyle Rittenhouse will be a guest at the fundraiser. Can you comment on that? Is that true?
That's not something I've ever heard.
Would this be the last word, whatever decision comes today, do you think?
Well, certainly this is the last word in the state of Maryland, and I'm not going to speculate on any attorney advice or any options. As a member of the Supreme Court bar, I am always proud of the constitutional process that you can always appeal to the Supreme Court, but that's not something that's even considered at this point. I'm going to look to the attorneys for advice.
But the door is open, I guess.
Well, as it is for every case.
Delegate,
What would,
sorry.
go ahead, man.
You mentioned the right to for every candidate to request a recount. Do you already have specific plans to petition for a recount before actual election day, or
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It's hard to speculate on anything like that, so no.
so are you recruiting anybody or have lawyers on hand to do any kind of petition for a recount after election day?
Well, unlike the Westmore campaign, we don't recruit people to work the ballot issues and potentially, look at those issues. We are certainly involved heavily to make sure that people have the right to vote. That's why we're here today, to make sure every vote counts. And we're excited to run hard to bring out the votes to make that happen for our win.
Are you recruiting poll watchers for election day?
Well, I think every candidacy has poll watchers, and yes, we have poll watchers.
Logistically speaking, it took them forever to count mail-in ballots last time during the primary. Now, local governments change in December. What happens if they can't get those ballots counted in time to make a decision for county executives, county councils, that sort of thing?
I don't think there's been an issue since the last that I heard. Montgomery County is the only county that had this concern, and I don't think there's any kind of constitutional crisis in Montgomery County the last I've heard.
The delegate, you mentioned the possibility of an appeal to the Supreme Court. What federal issue is preserved in the trial court hearing or in the appeal hearing that would allow you to take it to the Supreme Court? Because most of the challenge appeared to me, as a non-lawyer, to be related to specific articles in the state constitution and the Maryland Bill of Rights.
I want to be very clear. I haven't stated anything about a possibility of a Supreme Court appeal.
You're not ruling it out.
Well, I can't. That would be something that
So what would
is
the
part
basis
of the.
be, I think, is what I'm asking.
That would
What's
be,
in the court record that would allow you, that's preserved?
That would be part of the attorney-client discussion. So I'm not willing to speculate on any of that at this point.
We're going to do 2 more questions.
Because we're going to win. I believe firmly that this court is very clearly going to handle these issues in a substantive and deliberative fashion to ensure that the rule of law is upheld, that our Constitution is preserved, and the process of a governor's veto is not going to be forum shopped and overturned simply if the legislature does not do so. That's what's at stake today, and so I'm very confident that the court is going to see those issues and uphold the constitutional process in Maryland so that regardless of the issue in the future, we don't have this continuing precedential concern.
Your running mate circulated on social media a post stemming from a conversation that General Flynn had on social media, and it had to do with the 16-year plan to destroy America. Do you worry that Democrats have a 16-year plan to destroy America, as your running mate appears to have?
I would deny that that's accurate. I don't believe that's a concern, and certainly can't speculate or comment on something I'm not aware of. So I think that it's not about Democrats and Republicans. This election is about the people, to make sure that they have a voice in their government, instead of the international corporate lobbyists and special interests that are supporting my opponent. We are running for the people's voice, and I pledge that every single day as your governor, you are going to have your voice at the table. You are going to be heard. And you're going to be included in a transparent and open government.
Do you think you're going to win? There's now 2 independent polls that show that Westmore has much more stronger support than you do. Do you think you're going to win in November?
We're going to win because if you look at even those polls, when the question is asked about the economy, for instance, 51% said they are already decided to vote for me and 39% for Westmore. And so the issue is just simply making sure that we get our message out and that people understand that we stand for putting money back in your pockets, and we're doing that. We're excited. The ground game is there, and so the game is on. We're going to win.
You described those polls as push polls. Can you give an example of how they were push polls?
Well, when you have questions that seem to favor a particular persuasion, it demonstrates a lack of, or it demonstrates a certain potential bias. I certainly think that when you look at the electorate, also there's ways that everybody knows that you can do qualitative rather than quantitative polling results. So I'm not concerned about the polls.
What questions are you talking? What questions specifically are you talking about?
I think I'm just
We're gotta get going.
told that we're finished now. So I want to thank everyone for your time coming out today. This is really about our Constitution, our process. It's a historic moment in Maryland to see which way the court decides this. Thank you for being here, and we hope to give you an update
Did
soon.
you have any thoughts on the marijuana?
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
Thank you, everyone.